The story of immigration to America has been a strenuous one, to say the least. Thousands of people from different ethnic groups around the world came to America and were both welcomed and restricted. The decision of who can and can't enter, how many of each people can enter, and why immigrants came to America is worth a story worth telling and understanding for generations to come. We as a people, a single unit of the human race, need to come together and educate the next generation in how immigration changed America forever. My argument is that the U.S. government chose to restrict major ethnic groups that were immigrating to the United States because if they didn't put forth the restrictions they did by way of slavery, the Immigration Reform Act of 1965, and the Chinese Exclusion Act, the United States would have been a worse place to live and wouldn't have became the great country it is today. I believe everything happens for a reason, and even though these restrictions and immigration hurt many people and families, it was part of a plan to make America a giant mixing pot of different ethnic groups and people to live together. My four primary sources for this paper are the Immigration Act, the Chinese Exclusion Act, a book called Our Immigrants at Ellis Island by Ms. Frances E. Clark, and the slave narrative of Harriet Jacobs, who was born into slavery and tells about her experiences in slavery. My first source is the Immigration Reform Act of 1965. Prior to this act, immigration laws favored people from Northern and Western Europe over those from Southern and Eastern Europe, Asia, and Africa. The use of the quota system determined who and how many people could enter the United States at a time. President Johnson signed the 1965 amendments to the Immigration Reform Act of 1952. As a result, the quota system was ended. The law authorized 120,000 people from the Western Hemisphere and 170,000 people from the Eastern Hemisphere. The law emphasized family reunification and occupational skills and refugee status. With the passing of this act brought more equal chances for immigrants to come to America from Northern, Western, Southern, and Eastern Europe. With the triumph of nativism in the United States, the question wasn't who, but how we should restrict immigration as a country. This act was the answer. The Quota Act, in fact, made the idea of whiteness equal to citizenship. This national act was a fundamental step toward immigration reform and having a better handle on incoming immigration and immigrants themselves. My second source is the Chinese Exclusion Act. The Chinese Exclusion Act was the first major law restricting immigration in the United States. It effectively halted Chinese immigration for 10 years and prohibited Chinese from becoming U.S. citizens. The 1943 Act still allowed only 105 Chinese immigrants per year, reflecting persisting prejudice against the Chinese in American immigration policy. It was not until the Immigration Act of 1965, which eliminated previous national origin policy and large-scale Chinese immigration to the United States, was allowed to begin again. Before this act was passed, the Chinese were seen as unassimilable and a massive opposition. They were low-wage laborers that faced major opposition. The Chinese Exclusion Act suspended immigration for 10 years and even provided for deportation of said immigrants. By the early 20th century, there is exclusion of all Asians in America. Throughout immigration, race was the defining feature of who is and isn't allowed to immigrate in America. My third source is the book Our Immigrants at Ellis Island by Ms. Frances E. Clark. This book is descriptive of the reception, inspection, and experiences of immigrants in the detention room and railway offices of Ellis Island. All the stories in the book are true accounts of immigrants that came into America. When learning about immigration in books and lectures, you aren't able to really examine what immigrants had to go through in detail accounts. This book tells specific accounts on immigration and what they went through. This is a great source because I am able to get a first-hand account on what went on Ellis Island and how the immigrants were both treated and cared for during their immigration process. My fourth source is a slave narrative of Harriet Jacobs. This is a first-hand account of Harriet Jacobs, who was born a slave in Edenton, North Carolina in 1813. She tells her experiences as a slave girl. Harriet was unaware of her slave status until she was 6. Harriet endured unremitting sexual harassment from Dr. James Norcom, her owner, and became the object of abuse. Jacobs also describes those of numerous other children, both black and white, free and unfree, male and female, children and adolescents, including her own. Similar to my book source, this primary source is a great way to see what it was like on the inside of being a slave. This source is good because it will add to my argument that immigration restriction and slavery were part of the big picture of making America what it is today. I think the legacy of American immigration is still an ongoing process. People around the world are still immigrating in and out of the United States. From where immigration into America started to where it is now proves that even though a multitude of ethnic groups immigrated into the United States and faced challenges and restriction, eventually, through past laws and time, America became a nation of diversity, a nation of adversity, and a nation of equality.